Good morning, everyone. 1 week is now passed since the precipitous and calamitous and sudden closure of the Ontario Science Centre. In one fell swoop, jobs lost, families thrown into disarray, summer plans evaporated, and a masterpiece disgraced. At the time, the Ford government vehemently maintained that the closure is a safety issue and that the roof was about to collapse. He has stubbornly pointed to an engineering report as his support for this, even though the report says nothing of the sort. He is counting on the people of Ontario not reading the report. He wants you to believe his spin and believe his fantasy. Well, I've read the report. It does not say the Science Centre needs to close. It does not say the roof is about to collapse. And it certainly does not say that repairs are too expensive or prohibitive. Not at all. But I'm a doctor. I'm not an engineer or an architect. So today I have someone eminently more qualified. Brian Rudy, standing to my left, is the partner and principal architect at Moriyama Teshima Architects, the firm which built the Science Centre. Together, we're going to explain the engineering report and demonstrate that the building is safe, that it should remain open, that repairs can and should responsibly be done, and that the province has the means to do it. This, combined with the fact that there has been an outpouring of public support and philanthropy to restore the Science Centre, and I've personally verified many of the claims myself, means that there is no excuse to delay. I am proud to turn it over to Brian Rudy.
I want to demystify this a little bit. We've had a chance to look at the reports as well. I guess what jumped out at us the most saliently, if I could leave one point behind, which is that the exhibition spaces, the vast majority of them are completely safe. There's not even the type of panel that's been pointed at, so-called RAAC panels, which are essentially concrete panels. None of those exist over most of the exhibition space. I think I counted about 11 panels that were above there that were in need of repair. 11 out of thousands in this building. It's a drop in the bucket. It's probably less than 1% of that roof. And again, those panels can be very easily repaired, cordoned off where they are an issue, and the public can be completely protected and safe in that repair. In fact, this is a normal thing for all buildings that go through regular repairs. A building of this age, of course, is going to see repairs like this, and unfortunately this building has been allowed to lapse into disrepair, and so we have these problems cropping up. So that's the big picture. I want to sort of dive in a little bit. So this roof was built back in the 60s. It was made of these sort of concrete panels that are maybe 5 feet wide. They span about just under 60% of the entire roof of the building. There's actually 3 buildings. So there are areas where these roof panels don't exist at all, and that's, as I said, the main exhibit spaces. Where they do exist, there have been problems recently that have come up in the last probably decade or two because of bad maintenance. These panels are actually completely fine and completely safe and would continue to be so if they weren't tampered with. So what happened is, in the past, I want you reporters to fact check me on this one, because I talked to a man who was part of the maintenance crew for the Ontario Science Centre back in the early, before the turn of the millennium, before 2000. He said that there was a on-site maintenance crew and facilities crew that knew the building intimately and went around and made repairs when necessary. And again, they knew about these panels back then, and they were careful not to disrupt them. The panels, as I said, are perfectly fine and can be for even hundreds of years unless they are subject to water. And so how do you get water to these panels? They're below a roofing assembly that keeps the water out of the building. If there's a penetration made through the roof, then that water has the opportunity to get to those panels. Not necessarily if the roofing is done well. But in his opinion, after they were let go, in-house facility service, they went basically privatized all the maintenance of the building, and those contractors, according to him, didn't know the building as intimately. So they would have probably punctured holes for ducts and pipes through the roof, and then those issues would have started to crop up if the roofing was done poorly. So that's a lot to chew on. Basically, all I'm saying is that these panels are fine. They're safe. Even the ones, the vast majority of the ones in the building are all fine. There is certainly a handful of panels that are of concern because of these repairs that have been made over the past decade or so. And even those, though, can be safely repaired, and you can cordon off the building. Just like imagine there was one of those bad panels above us. You could just close this room. You could even close half of the room because the threat is only where the panel is if it's above us here. So this is, again, as I say, very normal procedure for buildings of this size and vintage, and it's done all the time. There's nothing mystical about it or dangerous even. So the report is actually quite thorough. It's an excellent report. It identifies each and every issue with the roof, and you can look at those reports and you can see where those issues are. And a lot of them, as I said, are not above exhibit or even public space. There's certainly none over the IMAX theater. The main exhibits are free. There's even the Great Hall has maybe a handful of about 10 panels that need to be replaced in a more urgent way. So what the government's saying here is, or IO, I should say, IO is saying, is that they want to replace the entire roof. Okay, so that's fine. In fact, sure, if I was actually in charge of this, I'd say, yeah, we should probably replace all those rack panels. They're a threat, especially if you've got contractors going and drilling holes potentially. So yeah, we can replace them. But there's, again, only a handful that are urgent. The vast majority of the rest of them are completely safe and can be done as part of an ongoing maintenance program over the next 10 years. It's not the kind of boogeyman and the immediate urgency that they're trying to paint as a picture here. It's all normal maintenance cycle of a building. So why they pulled the exhibits, or why they're threatening to pull the exhibits out and move to another building and rent at taxpayers' cost another facility that's going to be even smaller, I could tell them there's a great space available, and it's called the Ontario Science Centre Building C. It's already got the exhibits in it. 99% of it is safe. There are other 1% that we can fix within the next few months very easily by cordoning off areas and doing so. So that's hopefully just demystified it a little bit. Happy to take questions, but I also want to say, as an architect and as a part of the team of professionals that build cities, that we don't build cities by tearing down our historic structures and our most beautiful and significant structures. We build cities that are fantastic, one amazing project at a time. This is such an amazing building that we all remember from our childhood, and we all remember taking our children through. And how can we allow this building to be desecrated in this way and maybe potentially torn down? It's just unthinkable. This is one of an inventory of grand buildings that was built in the centennial that we should be fixing up and continuing to use and enjoying for years to come, decades, maybe even centuries to come.
That certainly was Moriyama's wish and design.
So you agree that if you were in charge, you would replace the entirety of the roof, you say?
Over 10 years, yeah, I probably would.
Did you agree with the assessment that it would cost some up to $40 million to do that?
I don't think those numbers are correct. I
Why?
think it's closer to half that.
Why don't you think that's correct?
Well, read the report. It says it.
You think it would take 2 years as well? I think that's what it said.
If you were to add up a little bit of time here and there, maybe the balance of that in total would be 2 years. But again, that's spread out over a decade of time. The immediate repairs could probably be done in 3 to 6 months. And again, as the building is operating. I'll give you another example. The Toronto Reference Library is a building also our firm did back in the 70s. It's been fully occupied for the entirety of its life and continues to be. We've done a complete rejig of that building. Every square inch of it's been rebuilt and reconstructed, and it's never closed its doors to the public. We do it by cordoning off areas, fixing them, and opening them up again. It's very simple.
When we put this type of critique to the government over the past week, they point to a passage in the report that reads like this. They say the report states, to mitigate all risks associated with RAC, it is recommended that all RAC roof panels be replaced in their entirety with new steel deck in alignment with the next roofing assembly renewal.
Correct.
They point to that saying that means we need to shut it down now. When I see a lot of interesting words there at the end of that sentence. Can you just parse whether
the
I'm
interesting words
correct
there are in the what did it say?
In alignment with the next
There you
roofing
go.
assembly renewal.
So that could be 10 years from now when they're going to replace the roof because it's past its useful life. And the panels will remain safe. The ones that aren't urgent can we remain safe until that roofing
So
replacement.
when the government points to that sentence saying that backs up their interpretation of the report, they are what? They are telling us a mistruth?
I mean, it can be, the statement is true. It can all be replaced over the next 10 years in accordance with normal maintenance cycles of any building.
Can you talk a little bit about, you said they were easy repairs. What do the repairs entail? I mean, how, just in layman's terms?
Yeah.
What happens?
In fact, some of these repairs have already been done on the building. That's another point I wanted to make. They've had other panel issues and they've replaced them with steel deck. So what they do is they go up on the roof, literally just cut a hole over the problem panels, remove the panels and replace them with a steel deck, just a big piece of steel, and then re-roof in that area, and that's it. And so obviously underneath that, there's a potential for debris and stuff to fall. That's where you want to cordon off the area to make it safe.
So, Jeff, just to respond very directly to your question, what the government is doing is taking details that are technically accurate, but coming forward with a completely flawed interpretation of those technically accurate details. The reality is that, as we heard from Brian, it's not a bad word to say that the roof will eventually need to be replaced at the next roof renewal cycle. That is not right now. That does not justify a precipitous closure with literally 2 hours notice at the Ontario Science Centre on a Friday afternoon. And why are we seeing this in flawed interpretation? Because these recommendations are not happening in a vacuum. They are taking place within the context of a premeditated, intentional plan to cover up a $600 million taxpayer-funded parking garage at Ontario Place that they are contractually obligated to provide for a private foreign spa company. This is the reason that no matter what details come out, they will persist with this. We have, for example, just provided a technical explanation of the report which demonstrates that there's no justification for a sudden closure. We have, Brian very humbly neglected to mention that his firm has offered to provide the consulting services to repair the deck pro bono. He has compiled a list of growing individuals in the design and construction industry who are willing to provide their services to fix this pro bono. We have seen multiple people from the public, philanthropists, come out and say they will donate millions of dollars to keep the Science Centre open. When we have experts saying the roof is safe, a report that actually says the roof is safe, when we have people who are willing to do the work for free, and if it can't be provided for free, other people who are saying the government doesn't have to pay for it, we will pay for it. When all of those things exist, there is only one other alternative hypothesis left for us to conclude. And it is that no matter what we say or what the public commits to, this government wants to close and move the Science Centre. Every single time this government proposes to do something, the people of Ontario need to ask themselves, which one of Doug Ford's friends is about to benefit? And in this case, it's a private foreign spa company at Ontario Place.
Can I just get a response to something else the government has said to us when we've raised some of these issues about the report? This is from a statement from the Infrastructure Minister's office. There are significant areas in buildings A and B that have not been investigated due to site conditions. These areas could not be fully investigated while the building remained open. Is there any truth to that there are panels that they didn't get a chance to look at that could be damaged and could pose a danger?
Yes, that's true, and I didn't run the numbers on it, but it probably is less than 10% from my visual observation of that. Yeah, you're right, mostly buildings A and B. The building B is the actually my favorite building. Is the Trillium building sitting on the hill, and it's one of the grandest spaces, arguably, in this country. And the center of that hasn't been investigated. My gut's telling me it's not even RAC because it's a very different and very specific type of construction. But that has to be investigated, absolutely.
Can it be investigated while the center while it was operating?
Yes, it can be.
Mr. Rudy, can you talk about that offer that you made the government?
Sure. What do you want to know?
Tell us what it is.
Well, we've offered pro bono services to help mitigate these urgent issues, right? I mean, we know there are panels that need replacing, and that's something that takes a little bit of consulting work and, of course, a lot of construction work. As I've said, a lot of these areas have, over the past couple of decades, been repaired in just this way. So there's some work that has to be done. So we have reached out to the design and construction community. We have, we're not willing to release the names just yet, but we've got structural engineers, envelope engineers, contractors, heritage architects, a whole gamut of all the appropriate professionals that are all coming forward and saying.
Reached out to the government formally?
Well, we. I'm not sure how to. Yeah, we have. I suppose we put out a media release about this.
You
Yes.
haven't heard back from them?
No.
And sorry, all those people would be working pro bono?
Yes. Well, the contractor's going to do the work pro bono. I don't know that they would pay for the materials, right? That's that might be something they not be willing to do.
The other thing the government says is, look, this building has a ton of other problems. It needs a full refurb. The number they quote is $478 million, HVAC and electrical and whatever. And so it's not worth it to keep it going. What do you make of that?
So yeah, Elsa Lam from Canadian Architect has debunked that 400 million number that you just quoted. That's grossly inflated. The actual number, according to Pinsent, who did the initial assessment of the building, was 142 million. And to that, they added a 1.85 complexity factor, which is quite high. I mean, that's basically like doubling the number that they estimated. Fair enough. I mean, it's a complex building. There may be some complexities, but that is a pretty healthy contingency. To that, I believe IO has added an additional 40% markup on that for whatever reason. So that's how that number got so inflated. So maybe it's around 200, 250 of those mechanical repairs. Yeah, it's true. The building, again, if you don't maintain a building and replace its mechanical systems, they're gonna run out of gas. Well, hopefully they run out of gas because we're trying to electrify buildings in this day and age. Anyways, that's another story. But yeah, all that mechanical work needs to be done. But that's been deferred for how many decades now, and it's well past its useful life.
The other thing the government, I think, doesn't say quite out loud, though, is that, look, the decision to move the Science Center to the waterfront has already been made. So this discussion about the roof in the existing building is irrelevant by the government, elected by the people of Ontario. But regardless, it's been made, whether we agree with it or not. So the argument would be, why do I keep this building? Why do I fix it up if I'm already moving the Science Center somewhere else? I mean, no one seems to have thought all this through. But what do you make of that? That just saying, look, we're not going to spend all this money because we're not going to have the Science Center here, so we don't need. We're not in this business anymore.
Two ways I would respond to that. One is that, again, go back to my statement about how you build great cities. You build them one great building at a time. This is unarguably a great building, and it needs to be preserved for that reason alone, whether it remains a science center or not. And then second thing I would say is that we know that the Eglinton Crosstown is going to open someday, right? We hope. It's going to open someday, maybe soon. It's going to be a major transit hub, as we know. It's going to be crossed by the Ontario line, which is another major, we're talking Yonge and Bloor status of this neighborhood, right? It's a major urban node now. The Science Center was built when this was a suburb. It was built for a different kind of different kind of use, different kind of environment. It's now it sits at a major urban hub. What do we have at urban hubs? We have lots of housing, of course, and there's lots of housing being planned there. But we also have major public facilities. Hey, we have a science center there. Perfect.
Speaking of demystifying, the City of Toronto says the Science Center applied for a building permit to fix a roof in the Rainforest Center in May. which is, only a month or so before this catastrophe happened. What does that application for that building permit tell you about what they knew about the roof at the time, and how, your take on what relevance that has to the rest of everything playing out over the past few weeks?
Well, it tells me that they knew this building enough to when they take the appropriate measures when they did some repairs that were required. I don't think it should be a mystery that these rack panels have been known about. The gentleman, again, who is part of the facilities of the building, mentioned to me they knew well about these and they knew how to deal with them. This is not a mystery, and this is not a new thing that's being discovered.
So the existence of that building permit tells you that before this engineering report was made public last week, they had a sense of the extent of the scope required, to repair, and maybe that they had a heads up, I guess. At
the very least, they would have known that there were rack panels in the building and that they had to be treated carefully.
In terms of cost, I don't know if this is in your area of expertise, but I'm wondering what would a 50 to 100,000 square foot facility of the type they're looking for cost versus the cost of fixing up one of the buildings as you've described as one option.
Yeah, the cost of building new is always a little bit more than renovating, right? Which makes sense. Building a new science center these days, I can't imagine you could do it for anything less than $1,000 a square foot, probably more, given where we are in the industry. And renovating is going to be south of that for sure, and depending on what you're doing. But I guess there's another kind of cost I want to talk about, which is the carbon cost. So we know we've done an analysis on the carbon cost to build a new building because we do this all the time. And the carbon cost of doing renovations, it's significantly higher to build new because you're bringing all new materials, which all have embedded carbon in them, right? Embodied carbon comes as part of manufacturing, shipping, and construction. All of that carbon is 7 times what it would cost to renovate an existing building. A brand new building is significantly greater.
I was talking about just the temporary point. So if you imagine it going to 2029, what a cost of renting a facility of 100,000 square foot would be for those years versus the cost of the minor single building repair you were talking about earlier.
I mean, I'm not in the business of renting facilities, but that's going to be. I can't imagine it's going to be more expensive to repair what they have in front of them, even over the next 10 years, than to rent a facility for 10 years.
Could you just talk about, just building on what you said earlier about the nature of this building, the nature of the site? Shouldn't the province have figured out what it was going to do with this building? It didn't even factor into its calculations of the cost of moving to a new science center. The cost of it just assumed it wouldn't have to pay to fix up the old one. But there's no scenario where a responsible government would allow a building like this to just be torn down, right? I mean, this building has to be, you said that something about whether it's a science center or something else. This is an important building that needs to be, which they're obligated to take care of, right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely. I assume, I haven't read the lease agreements, but I assume the province is responsible for maintaining a state of good repair on the building, yes.
Right. Maybe this is because I spent too much time in Vancouver, but the classic route there would be to save a building on the bottom, you put a condo on top of it. It seems like there's tons of land there and tons of space in the sky to put housing that would make a lot of money. Is there an opportunity for something like that where you could save this by monetizing the land right around it?
Yeah, I mean, sure, you could do whatever you want. That's a possibility, but the reality here is that I would say only 20% of the existing building footprint, maybe less, is developable in that way. Buildings B and C in the valley are never going to be developable in that way because they're on TRCA protected land. The TRCA is never going to allow that.
Could any of these buildings be repurposed into something else, be it housing or commercial or?
That's an issue I've been struggling with, and I think the short answer is probably, but what use would it be? This is a very specifically built, purpose-built facility. It's very unique. How are you going to put housing in a building, especially in the valley, which is an exhibition building, which has no windows? So single-story, vast spaces that have no windows. I mean, how's the housing work in that scenario? So that's the fear of so putting in other uses and complementary uses. Absolutely, I think that's a great idea. But repurposing the entire building for something else, I think that's a long shot. We see that all the time where buildings are abandoned because they pass their useful life and they move out and they build something else. And the building sits there because no one's kind of invested in it. No one's got like a perfect use that fits exactly in it. This is a very unique building. That's a really huge risk if you do that, if you have that kind of train of thought.
Isn't it the parking lots though where you'd want to develop? Anyway,
the parking lots you can develop. In fact, they're already doing that in the very north parking lot. There's a huge development going there.
And do you have a quick take on Goldie Gamari getting kicked out of PC Caucus?
Her most recent meeting with the far-right extremist gentleman, to use the term loosely, from England, was deeply painful to many Canadians and certainly many Ontarians who've been reaching out to our office. And regrettably, when that was pointed out to her, she couldn't muster the courage even to give an apology. And so it feels like the right move, certainly.
Do you believe she didn't know who Tommy Robinson was?
I don't think that if I would, if my team put in my schedule that I was supposed to meet someone, it wouldn't be there without an explanation of why I'm meeting them and who they are. Is there a world in which she personally didn't know? Well, there is an alternative universe in which that is possible. I think that alternative universe is extremely unlikely, and in that circumstance, it's up to her team to make sure that she knows. And I think she knew exactly what she was doing.
It's an alternative universe where no one on her staff or her seemed to know about Google.
Correct.
Yeah, the search engine. Yeah.
The internet generally
Yeah.
seemed to be unavailable to them.
Evidently.
Yeah.
Do we have anyone on the conference line? No. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone.